Hello, I'm Mary Arnott, your host and producer of Attitude. The topic of the show today is one that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. My guests and I are going to talk about successful marriage. Whether you've been married for many years or just recently engaged or hoping to marry someday, I think you will find the show one that will be helpful, enlightening, and inspiring. With so many marriages ending in divorce, I think people would benefit greatly by hearing from a couple who have had a very successful marriage. That's why I'm very happy to welcome my guests, Judy and Reverend Michael Billingsley. Welcome, Judy. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I have to start. I have a lot of questions, and I don't know if we'll get through all of them, but there's so many important things that we can talk about relative to successful marriage. I wrote some things down. And I guess the first one, I hope I don't trip Mike up on this, but exactly how long have you been married?
Well, let's see. We've been married for 42 years and 7 months.
Well, you're not going to give me days and hours and minutes.
No, we will celebrate our 43rd anniversary this June.
Congratulations. That's so wonderful. Well, tell me a little bit about how you met.
Well, this could be a story that we talk about all night, but I'll give you the short version.
I might need the short version, yeah. We're only at half an hour, Judy. So.
Mike was at the Coast Guard Academy, and I was in nursing school in Connecticut. And we met through mutual friends. And then a couple of weeks after we met, there was a fourth-class dinner dance at the academy, and Mike needed a date. So we had a fun evening that evening, and we dated for 3 years after that.
So it just kept going after that.
Got off to a great start.
Smart one over there. In marriage, it just seems like there's so many important decisions that can throw couples off, whether it be how to deal with finances or in-laws, or I'm looking at the notes here and there could be so many things. What advice would you give a couple in terms of how to deal with very important decisions that come up in the marriage?
I think that for us, there's sort of a discovery thing that goes on when you're getting to know each other. Mm-hmm. And we discovered that Judy, being a nurse, and me at that time being an engineering student, we sort of had similar approaches to how you should go about gathering the necessary information to make a good decision.
We like to know the facts, so we gather all of the information and then make a decision.
So personality-wise, you're kind of similar in that then. You like to gather.
We're very compatible in that. We've discovered over the years that I'm a little bit more impulsive and adventurous, and Judy's a little bit more methodical and careful. But the basic approach is the same. Learn what you're making a decision about. Talk about it a good deal. And then go with it.
Weigh the pros and the cons. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's good to take a pad of paper and write the risks and the benefits.
I thought I was the only one that made lists all her life. I'm always writing down, let's see, should I do this or that? And I'm writing the pros and cons. I guess it works in marriage, though, too.
Exactly.
Then you got to write there on paper, and then you make your decision.
That's exactly right. I think discussing finances is a important aspect and how you handle them, and be realistic about it. And for us, we've just learned to live within our means.
Well, finances certainly can be an area of a lot of stress, a lot of discourse. Mm-hmm. But obviously, for 42 years and 7 months, you've been able to work that out.
One of the things that we've managed to do so far, at least, is to not get in over our heads. And so I think we've always taken those enthusiastic things that realtors and bankers will tell you with a healthy dose of salt. Mm-hmm. And that has, it hasn't reduced all the stress in our lives, but it certainly has taken and made them manageable for us.
Well, sometimes there are very major events that happen, though, that maybe you don't anticipate.
Right.
Job loss, career change, you got to move. I mean, all sorts of things that can be very stressful. What advice would you give about some major event changes in a married couple's life?
And I think we've been through all of that. This was our 12th moving to Massachusetts.
You've moved 12 times, and
10 of those while we were in the Coast Guard. And a Coast Guard move is a little different than some moves in that there was no choice on our part. I got orders, not requests, to move on. And so it was a given that we were going to go through a process. Unfortunately, moving in the military is a very orderly kind of process. And so by the time we were actually moving on our own, we kind of had the ropes on that. Now, I think the bigger decisions revolved around career changes.
Right. When Mike retired from the Coast Guard and started his second career, there were a lot of changes there.
does that have anything to do with white collar he's wearing?
That's exactly
A lot
right.
to do with it, yeah. But it wasn't just my career change that was affected there either, because those were some really big decisions for you too.
Right. I had been a stay-at-home mom. For the 20 years that Mike was in the Coast Guard, he traveled quite a bit and was gone. And we made a decision that I would be at home when the children were younger to give them that stability with Mike being gone so much. So I think it's very important in these major decisions to maintain your core values, maintain your faith, and the mutual respect for each other. And it all comes down to relationships, and it's your relationship with God, it's our relationship with each other, and our relationship with our children that are so important. And so as you're facing these major changes, whether it be a move or a job change, because when I went back to school and back to work, that meant every time we were moving, I was changing my job too. So the move up to Massachusetts was the first time that we moved for my job. All of the other moves have been for Mike's job. So,
Well, there was some give and take there then, at least with the last
there was a good deal of it. I think the move that took us to seminary was a big one for the family. It was really huge for Judy because that put her in the position of being the family's principal breadwinner. And that was a reversal of what, when we got married, was the traditional roles, much more common now.
right, even though we had talked about it and prepared for it when we arrived in Alexandria, Virginia, and when Mike went to seminary, it was an overwhelming fear right then of the responsibility that I had financially and for the family. So no matter how much you prepare, there's still the fear of the unknown out there. But that's where your faith really plays a big part in all of this.
And as you said, your faith in God and faith in each other. But things can change over the years, and certainly people's personalities, and to put a little plug in for my show, attitudes can change. And I know you said it's important to hold to your core values and your relationship, but what advice would you give, or maybe if you can talk a little bit about how do you adapt to those major changes that can happen in people? Because we all grow, change, react to our environment or personality or something. That's huge over, I would imagine, the span of 42 years. How have you adapted?
I know that over 42 years I've changed considerably. I was a skinny little boy. That's changed.
Well, I wasn't going to talk about appearances.
That's changed quite dramatically, but the boy part of it's changed a lot too. I don't think Judy's changed very much at all.
Oh, there we go. There's one of the keys. She's still your bride, huh?
Yeah, I think that for me the heart of it is that as people we need to grow. And we need to not only just give each other room to grow, but foster that growth when we have the opportunity.
I think it's very important to talk about that, even when you're thinking about getting married, and how you're going to support each other and foster that growth, so that you can grow together as a couple, and then and talk about those major decisions and how to handle finances, whether to have children or not, but be supportive of each other and help that growth. Because you're not the same person. I mean, when you have children, your children change you.
That's for sure.
And since we've been married, both of us have been to school and have, in my case, a very dramatic change in my career field. And you've been to school and have moved to a whole different place in your career, too, as a nurse.
So there's been an underlining theme that I'm hearing here is communication. We haven't actually used the word, but it's very evident.
Very
that
important.
You communicate a lot with each other about major decisions, major changes in life.
I think communication is a cornerstone. It's a cornerstone in a successful marriage. It's a cornerstone in your career. Communication is very important. I think of 3 T's. You need to make time for each other and to talk to each other and to touch. I think those 3 T's are very important.
Well said. I like the way you put that. What about, well, I guess let me see, questions here on how well do you think people should really know each other before they get married? Because as you mentioned, there's always the question of whether you're going to have children or what are you going to do career-wise. So what would you tell people who are either considering getting married or they're engaged? And some people rush into marriage, some people take a long time before they get married. I don't know if there's any secret or magic time frame there, but how well should people know each other? I
think that there's ancient advice that says that you don't rush into marriage, and I think that still is excellent advice. Some of the saddest experiences I've had in counseling folks that are in the process of dissolving a marriage, one of the sad things that I hear sometimes is that they had known each other for such a short period of time, and then found out that their core values, to start with, were completely different. That they had very different attitudes about how you handled money, or she wants children and he doesn't, or the other way around, or he must live in New England and she can't live in New England. Those kinds of things. You ought to know those before you get to the altar, for sure.
And it's good, but you don't know everything. I come from a family that was staunchly situated in New England, and I had not a clue of what it was going to be like moving all over the country. But it has been a challenge, and it's been a great experience. So some of it is to talk about it, but you can't know everything. So you have to take those new experiences and look at it as a challenge and as an adventure and go with it.
But you hear stories of people saying, "Oh, I love at first sight. I knew I was going to marry that person. There was no doubt in my mind." But yeah, you two, you said you dated for 3 years, and then something said, "Okay, we really do want to be together the rest of our lives, and we want to get married." And others, like you say, sometimes they rush into it and find out later that wasn't the best decision for them. But
well, I think with us, actually, it was a process of me convincing Judy that I would make a good husband, and that took a couple of years.
It took a couple of years.
Well, I only wanted to make this decision once, and so I wanted to be sure. And I come from a family, like I said, that is staunchly situated, and they never moved. So this was a foreign concept for me, that I knew that we would be moving a lot. So I wanted to be sure that I was really going to be able to do that.
Now, you said that you met through mutual friends.
Mm-hmm.
When you were thinking of getting married, did you talk it over with anybody?
We had a large circle of friends, and that, we would talk about it.
I think the first one I ever broached the subject to was my mother. And I said something along the lines of, "Mom, I think this is the girl I'm going to marry." And I was hoping at that time for sage advice. Instead, I am not ready to talk about that. But yeah, I did talk it over with close friends there at the Coast Guard Academy, many of whom were going through the same kind of thing. We had been there for 4 years. We'd formed strong attachments, many of us, and we're trying to make the decision as to whether those were relationships that were going to endure for the rest of our lives, or whether or not they had been fun while they were on, and then we would move on. And I'm certainly glad that we made the decision that we did.
Absolutely.
Well, let's see. Now, you've been through 12 moves. You've had children. How did the children adapt to all those moves? Was it a matter of something adventurous to them, or
really well, I would say.
We've been really blessed. We have 2 girls, and they adapted really well to the moves. And I think one thing that it's important for the parents to be on the same page and supportive of each other, so that we can help the children, because that was a lot of school changing, and we moved both girls in high school also. And
it had to be a rough time, yeah.
And that's not easy.
And we're really proud to say they both thrived through that.
So I think it's the positive attitude with parents that spills over onto the children, and we're really blessed. They're both good students too, so they moved easily as far as the academics were concerned. Mm-hmm. So I think that positive attitude is going with your theme here.
Going with the theme.
is very important. And when they were a little older, we would have them choose something. We made each move an adventure and a trip, pick out something on the in our travels that you would like to do, and it could not be all theme park or something like that. It had to be something educational too. Mm-hmm. And so they had some input when they were old enough to do that.
Well, not to throw you for a loop or anything, this wasn't a question I had in my mind at the time, but I was just thinking, so what's in store for the next 42 years?
Oh, wow. Well, we've already started on the grandchildren adventure. And another 42 years would give us more than ample time to be looking at great-grandchildren. And we certainly have enjoyed the dickens out of the grandchildren we have now. We've got 3, and they range from 14 to 5. And the time we get to spend with them, since none of them live here in Massachusetts, is not nearly as much as we would like, but it really is a joy. So I would imagine that there'll be more of that as the next 40-plus years might pass.
And there's a lot of this world we haven't seen yet, so we really enjoy traveling. So we will travel as much as we can. Well, we have our health and can do it.
That sounds really good. So is that something you talk through as well, trying to decide where you want to go and when you want to go?
Yes, we make our list.
You make your list, pros and cons.
One of our daughters gave us that book, 1,000 Places to See Before You Die.
Oh, yes.
And that has certainly been a source of inspiration. It was kind of fun to see that some of the places that were on that list we've actually been to. But yeah, that's one that we work on fairly constantly, is our anticipation of where is the next place we're going to go and what we'll see there, and then read about the place and that. And that was actually something I think we discovered along the way. I don't know that we really understood that was going to be something we enjoyed doing together quite as much as we do back when we were in our dating days.
So even though you were moving a lot in terms of your careers, you had to, but the actual traveling for fun and stuff was something you've discovered.
That had to come later.
It came later.
It had to come later. Yeah. Though the moving from place to place, you experience a place, when you're staying in a hotel and eating in restaurants, in one way, but when you actually live there, that's a whole other thing. When you're going to the grocery store, you're meeting people in town, you're meeting folks in church, you've got friends of your children's friends that you meet through them. Those are different kinds of experiences.
When we were moving and traveling from our old residence to a new one, we tried to make that as a fun vacation trip also. So it wasn't, a gruesome
Well, we may have to have a
trip.
whole nother show and talk about that, because moving, is, they said, is one of those, when they talk about things that causes stress in your
Stress,
life,
yes.
it's one of the biggest
Yeah.
things that produces the most stress. So
It definitely can be pretty stressful.
yeah, if you have secrets on how to make that fun, we may have to do a whole nother show on that one. I mean, I've moved a couple times in my life, and I can tell you the stress was amazing. Sometimes it was for career moves and family and other reasons, but it was very stressful. Yeah, and you obviously were very successful at it. So, well, you've talked about the importance of relationship and some of the keys, talking to each other, making time for each other, the touch, the whole getting to know each other. Is there anything else you want to add that we haven't talked about, or advice you want to give, or special thoughts?
As Judy was coming home today, she passed a church marquee that talked about sacramental marriage, and that led into a conversation we had at dinner, and I think it has a lot to do with marriage today, as how it might be different than perhaps it was perceived just a few generations ago. And the sacramental rites that we use in the Christian church were basically frozen in place in the Middle Ages. And the language has been updated, but the form is still very much one of a father giving his daughter to another man. And that's not the world we live in anymore.
It's different these days, isn't it?
The traditional question at the altar was, "Who giveth this woman to be married to this man?" And the proper response was, "I do." And then as time passed, it was, "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" And it was, "Her mother and I do." And then the language changed a little bit to, "Who presents this woman to be married to this man?" And the
Liberation, what can I say?
And I think in most of the weddings that I've done in the past 4 or 5 years, that part of the service is omitted completely. And it's one of the options in the marriage form is to omit that. And most brides choose not to be given away. And so I think marriage has become much more a partnership of equals. Two people who are, if you will, lashing their boats together to ride out the storm of life. And I think that in many respects that is much healthier for both folks in the marriage if the expectations are that we really are equal partners.
And it is a partnership, and it's a lot of give and take. Sometimes it's 30-70, other times it's 60-40. It's not always 50-50.
Well said.
But
yeah.
And I think that I'm truly blessed to be in the generation in which I am, in which a whole lot of men have discovered that there are things that they can do that were their mothers' purview entirely when they were kids. I've learned how to grocery shop and cook. I'm still not very good at cleaning. But there's actually a world of creativity there when you go into the kitchen. And I think I can honestly say my dad has never experienced that.
Well, times have changed.
Yeah, make a cup of coffee perhaps, but never cook dinner.
And we have a culture and a society that really allows men and women to be more on an equal footing.
Very
We don't
much.
see that everywhere in
Very
the
much.
world.
Well,
No,
but
and that's
yeah.
true.
we're very fortunate. be living in this world right now.
Yeah, and that, I was kind of chuckling to myself, Mike, when you were talking about how it's changed, that some women, they don't want today to say, who gives this woman, and the father says, I do. I've seen brides walk down the aisle by themselves because they're very proudly, giving themselves into marriage and want it very much to be on an equal footing. And then some others, like for the sake of the ceremony, like to hold to maybe a little bit more traditional, but it definitely has changed.
I've been privileged to officiate the weddings for both of our daughters. And the first had me walk her down the aisle and present her, and then run around back into the sacristy and change into vestments for the service. The second was bound and determined no one was giving her to anybody, and so I was there waiting for her as she came down the aisle. And you know what? They were both wonderful occasions.
Well, very thoughtful and wise words of wisdom. I wish we could go on and talk about this more, but I'm watching this little clock and we're out of time. So I want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the HCAM crew and all the volunteers that came out tonight. And this is another episode of Marry or Not, and I'm signing out with attitude. See you next time.
I'm Dr. Pamela Weinfeld.
I'm Dr. Louis Kushner.
Our skin is the largest organ in our body and serves many functions, including protection, shock absorption, and temperature control. It's also subject to many disorders and diseases.
Today, about 1 in 3 people suffer from skin ailments resulting in pain, disfigurement, or disability.
The most serious of these conditions is melanoma, a potentially deadly skin cancer that affects some 115,000 people each year. Its incidence continues to rise, but the good news is that if detected early, melanoma is highly curable.
Recognizing changes in your skin is the best way to detect melanoma, so examine your skin regularly. If you notice changes in a mole or other unusual conditions, contact your primary care provider.
Avoiding excessive exposure to the ultraviolet rays of the sun is the most important step you can take to prevent skin cancer. Using sunscreen, wearing protective clothing, and avoiding tanning beds are important preventive measures.
For more information on skin cancer and skin disease, visit skincarephysicians.com.